Imagine a city where bronze gleams under the African sun, where towering walls stretch for miles, and where the rhythm of drums echoes through courtyards alive with dancers, priests, and storytellers. This was Benin City, in the heart of West Africa, at the dawn of the 16th century. The Kingdom of Benin was no ordinary city-state. It was a marvel. Travelers from Portugal and Holland, arriving on Africa's shores, described it in stunned admiration. They wrote of its wide streets, so perfectly laid out they rivaled the great cities of Europe. They marveled at its earth walls, moats and ramparts so vast that even today, archaeologists call them one of the largest man-made structures in the world. But above all, they spoke of its art. The Benin bronzes, thousands of intricately cast plaques, statues and ritual objects, stood as living memory in metal. These bronzes were not mere decoration. They told the story of kings, battles, festivals, and gods. Each plaque was a page in a living history book. Each sculpture a link between the people and their ancestors. The Oba, Benin's king, was not only a ruler but a bridge between the earthly and spiritual realms. In his palace, bronze and ivory glowed in candlelight. The bronzes were placed on ancestral altars, keeping alive the connection between the living and the dead. To stand before them was to stand before history itself. And so, when Europeans looked upon this kingdom, many could not believe what they saw. How could Africans, whom they had long dismissed as primitive, produce art so sophisticated, so precise, so majestic? Some whispered theories that the bronzes must have been made by Europeans or taught by outsiders. But they were wrong. The bronzes were, and always had been, the work of Benin's own guilds, master craftsmen whose secrets were passed from father to son, generation after generation. For centuries, Benin traded with the outside world, ivory, pepper, cloth. But the kingdom was also fiercely independent. The Obas controlled trade tightly, refusing to become pawns in Europe's growing hunger for Africa. Benin was not to be dominated, not to be bent. But by the late 19th century, Europe's hunger had grown into something darker: empire. The scramble for Africa was underway. Britain, France, Germany, and others carved up the continent like vultures circling prey. And in the middle of this frenzy stood Benin, still rich, still proud, still unwilling to bow. In 1897, tensions reached a breaking point. British officials, determined to expand their control and open up Benin's resources, especially its palm oil and ivory, demanded that the Oba agree to their terms. But the Oba resisted. He insisted on sovereignty. He insisted on dignity. So the British hatched a plan. They sent an expedition, supposedly peaceful, into Benin territory. But the timing was provocative. It came during the Igu festival, a sacred period when the Oba was forbidden from meeting outsiders. The Benin chiefs warned the British to stay away. They refused. The result was bloodshed. Warriors of Benin ambushed the intruders. Most of the British party was killed. In London, outrage exploded. Newspapers screamed of a massacre. Politicians demanded revenge. And so the decision was made. Benin must fall. In February 1897, a British punitive expedition of 1,200 men marched on Benin City, armed with machine guns, artillery, and fire. What followed was not a battle. It was annihilation. The city was bombarded, set ablaze. The great walls crumbled, the palace torched. Priests, warriors, women, and children were slaughtered. The Oba was captured, exiled far from his people. Benin City, once a jewel of Africa, was reduced to smoldering ruins. But the soldiers did not stop at conquest. They looted. They ransacked the palaces, stripped altars bare, and carted away thousands of bronzes, ivories, coral regalia, and sacred objects. To the British, they were trophies, proof of victory. To the people of Benin, they were far more, the very soul of their kingdom. Imagine the silence that followed. Ancestral shrines once alive with bronze and prayer stood empty. Families looked upon vacant spaces where memory used to live. A kingdom story had been torn from its soil, packed into crates, and shipped across the sea. In London, the bronzes caused a sensation. At the British Museum, at auction houses, and in private collections, people gawked at their beauty. Suddenly, the same Europeans who had called Africans primitive were dazzled by their sophistication. They could no longer deny African genius, so they distorted it. Scholars and curators claimed these masterpieces were an anomaly, somehow separate from the rest of Africa, much as they would later do with Egypt. And so the bronzes spread to Britain, to Germany, to the United States. Today, more than 3,000 pieces are scattered across museums and collections worldwide. For decades, they were admired as art but stripped of their meaning, their context, their home. But the bronzes have voices. Each one carries whispers of exile. Each one remembers the soil of Benin, the rituals they once adorned, the ancestors they once honored. And for the people of Benin, Their absence is not just historical, it is spiritual. To this day, rituals cannot be performed in the way they once were. Memory remains fractured. Yet, even in exile, the bronzes became symbols. Symbols of Africa's stolen wealth. Symbols of colonial injustice. And symbols of resilience. For no matter how far they were carried, they never ceased to testify. We were here. We had civilization. We had genius. In the 20th century, as African nations rose from the grip of colonialism, the call for restitution grew louder. Scholars like Philip Dark, activists and Nigerian leaders demanded, "Bring them home." For every African child told that their ancestors had no history, the bronzes answered, "Look at me. I am your history cast in fire." In recent years, this cry has begun to be heard. Germany has agreed to return hundreds of bronzes. France has pledged restitutions. Even the British Museum, long the most stubborn, faces growing pressure. Each returned piece is not just an artifact. It is a heartbeat restored. Think of a child in Benin today walking into a museum in their own city, not London, and seeing the bronzes shine. Think of the pride swelling in their chest as they realize, "My ancestors built this. My people cast this. This is mine." That pride is healing. That pride is power. Because the looting of Benin was never only about objects. It was about identity. To steal the bronzes was to steal memory, to fracture dignity, to make a people forget who they were. To return them is to stitch those wounds, to tell the truth, to restore what was broken. And for the world, this story carries a lesson. History is never neutral. The objects in glass cases are not silent. They speak of conquest, of erasure, of resilience. To confront this truth is to confront empire itself. To return what was stolen is not to erase history, it is to finally face it. The fires of 1897 tried to consume Benin, but they could not consume its spirit. The bronzes survived. The people endured. And today, as they slowly come home, they carry with them not only memory, but hope. Benin lives. In its Oba, in its people, in its children, in the bronzes that endured exile. When those bronzes return, they will not just be artifacts. They will be ancestors to the soil that gave them life. Because what was stolen was never truly lost. It waited. It endured. And now, piece by piece, they shall return home.